Next up we've got CC14. This entire topic has been highlighted, and they've also highlighted the core practical that comes out of this topic, so it's definitely one that deserves your attention. However, I think it's a topic that we've always been quite strong on, so this video is going to be pretty short. One thing I do want to highlight though is graph questions. It's the topic that you're most likely to be asked to either draw a graph or to work with a graph. If you are asked to draw a graph, please make sure that you label the axes and include the unit. So if you're doing concentration versus time, make sure you give the unit for concentration, make sure you give the unit for time. So label your axes, plot your points nice and clearly, and then draw your line of best fit. If you end up with something that looks like this and it curves, which they often do in rates of reactions, you're not supposed to join that up with a ruler. You're supposed to do it freehand and draw it as a curve, okay? And most of the graphs and rates of reaction will work out as being a curve. The other thing they can ask you to do with graphs, and this is commonly missed because there won't be an answer line, they'll say the graph in figure 2 shows a reaction that was carried out at 20 degrees Celsius, draw a line on the graph to show the reaction 40 degrees Celsius. Often that question gets overlooked because there's not an answer line for it, so please make sure you don't miss it. And if you are drawing that graph for 40 degrees, there's two things that you need to be aware of. Because you're doing it at a higher temperature, the rate of reaction is faster, so the line should be steeper, so you get 1 mark for drawing it steeper. But you're doing it at the same temperature, it's going to be faster, but you're still going to make the same amount of product. So you get 1 mark for drawing it steeper, but 1 mark for leveling it off at exactly the same place as the original line. The only time your line should go beyond what was originally there is if you've increased concentration. So if I increase concentration, then I'm going to get a steeper graph, but I'm also going to get more product formed, but it's only concentration that will give you a higher line. The other thing to note with graphs is if they ask you to use the graph to calculate the rate of the reaction, and for that, if they ask for it at a specific point, you are going to need to draw a tangent. So there's your graph. They might ask, what is the rate of the reaction at this specific time? You draw a tangent, which is a line that cuts the graph at one point only to the graph at that specific time, and you get the gradient of that line. So change in y over change in x to get the gradient. Once you've got the gradient, that equals the rate. So again, there are lots of practice questions of that in the booklet. Please do practice it at least once. Make sure that your tangent and your rate is within range of what the mark scheme expects. And also make sure you've got a pencil and a ruler with you in your exam. Last thing I wanted to highlight, just again a potential 6 marker. I mean, we were very good at doing these back when we originally did this topic, but your particle collision theory, it's, you know, again, they've highlighted this topic. It is a potential 6 marker. Please make sure you read through the worked examples on collision theory and make sure that you are phrasing things the correct way. You're never supposed to say more collisions, you're supposed to say more frequent. And when you're talking about temperature, there are 2 specific things that you need to mention. Whereas temperature, you need to talk about the increased energy means more frequent collisions because they're moving faster, but you also need to talk about more particles having the activation energy. So please make sure you do read through that. Read through the worked examples, make sure you've got a good exam technique. The core practical, as I said, has also been highlighted, so look in your core practical booklet where I go through that practical in more detail, and there's lots more practice questions there that aren't included in this booklet that you can have a look at with the answers to make sure you are as prepared as possible.